So we've got a chat and conversation with two guys today, very special guys in terms of the work that they do in the wider sporting community. They work for an organisation that I've been involved with for 15 years, purely met by coincidence. There are no coincidences, and these two guys are responsible for supporting and helping young players, but more importantly, young people develop the skills and tools that they can to help them both in their sport of football, and beyond the sport as well. So Ryan and Simon, thank you for coming over. I feel very honoured that you're coming to Manchester today, actually, and it's not the other way around of me going to Preston. So, but yeah, great to have you both. We'll tell the story a bit about how we met, but just the insights of your journey. That's why we're here. You know, you both you've walked a lot of miles in terms of the aspirations that young people, but young aspiring athletes, specifically footballers, have. You've both walked those miles. And I guess there's some insights that you've experienced that now contribute to the work that you do, both personally and for your organisations. For those people out there, these two work with an organisation called Leaf Football Education, who do tremendous work. The name gives it away because it's involved with football, but I'm going to say, more importantly, they're involved with a lot of people's lives, and they've touched many thousands of young people's lives who will probably look back in their 30s and think that, you know, their organisation, these two, have had an impact on them. So how did we meet?
So you were working for LFE, providing the Train Brain workshop as part of the life skills programme to academy players, and I came in fairly fresh face, really. I've walked more miles in my role at LFE than I did as a player. So yeah, it's going back a long time now that we first met, and I was massively taken in by what you talked about at a conference, which was the first time I heard you speak. So I couldn't believe that this was the sort of thing that was happening in the academy space at that point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a good introduction, and we've had a lot of time since then where you've grown and built and been part of the journey that we've been on at LFE to do more of that. Yeah. So yeah, it was the start of a good relationship between us.
I'm trying to think back how many years ago that was. Yeah, I definitely didn't have this back then. Yeah, so
neither did I.
Yeah. So now I'm going back. I think it was 2010. I don't think you were around at that time. Maybe you were. You certainly weren't in this role, but
April 2010 I joined, and then we probably met soon after that. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good guess. Yeah. 2010. Wow. So I don't think things happen by accident. So Ryan, you won't know this part of the story, but I took a phone call in 2010 from a cold call, you know, one of those calls where you really want to say, I haven't got time. It was one of those calls. And the woman said, we've got an exhibition in Bolton, and you're involved with sports, aren't you? And I'm thinking, yes, I am. How do you know that? And she's got my number off some kind of database. And I said, what sports, this exhibition? She said, it's, you know, for football academies. I said, I don't really exhibit anything. You know, I've not got anything to sell, as in hard. And I'd not long written a book. So then I was thinking, I do. So she said, well, look, we've got a spot. I'm going to give it to you. we just need it filling. It was like 2-3 days before the exhibition. And so I turn up at Bolton Arena and I'm right in front of the entrance and all these academy players coming in and I'm just holding court with them, asking them about how to play in, what the season's been like. And the former CEO, Alan, had said, you're the most, everybody wants to come to your stand. And I remember going through a series of tests, where he said, I want you to come up and speak at a conference. I want to put you in front of the staff and we'll do a trial at one of the clubs, which was Oldham at the time. And I was like, a trial? Like, I've been doing this a long time and there's nothing to trial. But it was the start of this relationship of, I think, both being aligned with values of what do we really want to give to, you know, these young players going on this journey. So, and you told me you were at, was it Rochdale?
Yes.
Yeah. Injury?
I could use that one. But no, I was released and then picked up injuries beyond that.
Okay.
So, yeah, 6 knee operations later, having tried to carve a career out after being released.
Right.
So, yeah, interesting sort of journey throughout them 2 years. You know, obviously, you spend years and years and years as a child playing at different levels, was in the academy system at different clubs, going through school. Injury was just never ever even part of your psyche. You know, it just wouldn't happen. And then it was after being released by Rochdale, when you're sort of training on your own and you're in the non-league system, that the body's conditioning just isn't quite there. And all of a sudden I started picking up niggles. I thought, what's this all about? So yeah, I've had plenty of knocks, slight limp with me today. And then yes, it was really a case of sort of trying to enjoy the game rather than necessarily, you know, pitch for trying to play professionally.
Yeah.
It just got to the point where I need football back in my life and I will play at any level. So I reached the dizzy heights of exceptional kitchens in the Blackpool Sunday League. And then that took another twist where I became player manager. And funnily enough, I enjoyed that period more than ever. So, that was an interesting sort of tale and experience, really.
And Ryan, what about you? Because you know, your journey, slightly different. You've had 2 or 3 academies, haven't you, Simon?
Yeah.
That you've been in.
Yes.
And you were at one academy.
Yeah.
So tell us about.
Yeah, so I mean, I joined Bolton back when I was 11, and I was there then till I was 19, so a fair amount of time. Kind of seeing, I guess, quite a few interesting changes as well, because when I first joined Bolton, they were up in the Premier League,
really?
Kind of, in the top 10 of the Premier League, finishing the season, and I guess one of the biggest clubs, kind of northernly, I guess.
What are you thinking then, as a 10-year-old, and you're in the academy of a Premier League club?
Yeah, I don't think I thought too much, I guess, about the status of the first team when I first joined. And I mean, they were in the Premiership for good 3-4 seasons after that. It was only kind of, I guess, into my more, if I can say it, my more mature years of playing, where they started to kind of drop down the leagues. But for the first few seasons, I didn't really think anything of it. It was amazing that we were able to kind of be in and around that environment, and I guess go and see the games and go and watch them against those type of opposition. But I don't think I got too caught up in that. I think I was just enjoying playing for a good academy. One that, I guess had quite a lot of northern qualities as well, in the terms of we were always hardworking, stuck in. We all got along, had a great group of lads around me at all times. So, I didn't really think too much of it. I think as I got older, though, you took more attention on, I guess, where the first team was and where it was heading. And like I say, they went into a few financial struggles. The club dropped down a few leagues, and by the time that I got released at my first year as a pro, they were kind of in League One, struggling in League One. So the difference, I guess, from start to finish was quite big. And I guess by that point, you were kind of involved in some of the first team struggles as well. So you were kind of thrown into a bit more of a real experience than, I guess, what you get when you're first joining at 11, 12, 13.
So you were at one academy and you were in 3.
Yes. So,
Right.
I mean, it was a childhood going from just loving football more than anything. You know, going through primary school and collecting panini stickers and drawing out an A4 your sort of dream team Premier League side and comparing it with your mates and just being obsessed. A Newcastle fan, going up to Newcastle, driving to the city thinking like the whole place is just buzzing around football, black and white shirts. Everyone was like, I need this in my life. I need to become a professional footballer. And growing up, I was certainly one of the better players in sort of the lower Sunday League divisions. Scoring shed loads of goals, and I was just desperate for a chance to play for an academy. Like the amount of pressure.
How old are you at this point?
Between sort of the age of 8 and probably 12, something like that, not experiencing the academy system, but knowing my mates had played for Blackpool or Preston and were nearby, I was obsessed. You know, every time I played a Sunday League game, I'd be writing down how many I'd scored and I'd be tracking it. Honestly, I was obsessed.
I'm assuming you're a striker at this
I was
point.
a striker at that point. Everybody was, weren't they, I think. And
I know goalkeepers who started off as strikers and then moved the way back.
yeah, I was obsessed with just trying to make it. I just needed a chance. And there was just something in me that I knew if I got it, I'd take it. Pressure I put on my dad was unreal looking back.
You put the pressure on your dad, not the other way around.
To get someone to come and watch.
Okay.
You know, because I don't think scouts saw everything all the time. And I knew I was delivering. I knew I was just desperate to get there. So use your contacts. He didn't have any contacts. He was a builder. But he might have had some, you know, working from a roof, you know, asking what people did. But he was just obsessed. You know, I was obsessed to get him to get someone to watch me. I remember sitting in the caravan one day in the Lake District and I was sort of taking my ball off and think back now, I would just be kicking a ball around in a field. No one's there. But I'd be doing what I could, constantly thinking someone might be watching me, hoping someone would be watching me, doing my stuff. And I did that everywhere. Sitting in the caravan, I was like, look at these calves, Dad, look at them. Like, you know, tensing my calves, I was like, I'm ready. You know, as a sort of 11-year-old, I was like, I'm good to go. Anyway, he eventually found someone to come and watch me. So that was my first introduction, Blackpool. So I went to Blackpool under 14. I was there for a season. Very different. You know, everyone's quicker, everyone's faster, everyone's stronger, everyone's a bit better. You try and get yourself into the team. You sort of put in positions that aren't necessarily relatable to what I was doing week in, week out at amateur level. So you've got to work your way in. Never really happened for me at Blackpool. So I was released after that, and then they were like, you know, we'll keep an eye on you and all that sort of thing. Didn't happen. So I went back in Sunday League and just bosh, was flying again. I was like, I'm home. Like everything was
And you're
for me.
like 15 at this.
15 at that point.
Right.
I didn't really think I was running out of time, but I played for probably the best junior team. I was known as Judas because I played for a worse team, and then I came out of Blackpool and signed for the best team. And it just worked. We won Lancashire Cup. Liverpool watched me. Went on trial there. Was there for 6 months in my under 16 year. Right. So I'd gone from Blackpool, and again I'm thinking I'm going to show you. So got to Liverpool, and again like the levels raise. Everyone's faster, everyone's stronger. Before I was just used to just zooming past anybody. And then it was like, right, okay, I'm going to have to think about what I'm doing. And I did well, and I'd sort of fit in, and I was sort of finding my feet still, you know, thinking under 16 I got half a season.
Who's in
that quick?
What year is this with their first team? And I'm just trying to think
Rafa
of
Benitez.
Okay,
so
right.
You know, there was players from kind of all over the place. When I was at Blackpool, it was local lads. When I went to Liverpool, you know, you're going further afield.
International lads as well.
Internationals. I've gone to somewhere where you've got your own locker as an under 16, your boots stay there at the club, you get your kit laid out. I can still smell the washing powder. I've smelled it since. I've thought, I know that one.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, and I remember just playing for Liverpool.
Now we're laughing, but this is also, you know, and we'll talk about this. Is in my work is like what takes you back to certain times when you've been at your best, and also when you've not. And so, you know, olfactory sense of smell is a very powerful one.
I know that one. It was the Reebok training gear, but, you know, we'd play, and I just thinking back when you say like what are my memories, it was wearing the red 10 and just thinking like Michael Owen wore this at one point. And I think as you get older, with more experience, you can learn to doubt yourself a bit. I think even at that stage I didn't think like, am I fit to wear the red 10? I just did. And it was probably only later on that you start to develop those insecurities, really. Yeah, absolutely.
What were your memories of that time as a 16-year-old?
I think as a 16-year-old, it was a bit of a weird one, because I'd kind of gone from, if I rewind the clock, I'd kind of gone from, a home setting that had changed quite a lot. So I was kind of going through a bit of a transition period already in my kind of under 16, where I was living with my grandparents. That had been a transition that I'd kind of gone through to start that year. So I'd kind of gone into, my under 16 year as a bit here but there at the same time with how I was kind of feeling. But I went in, and I think throughout my actual under 16 year, I had two very good coaches, which I think they were understanding of how I've been, how I was, what I was going through. And I think they, to be fair, are some of my biggest memories, in total honesty, that I think the way that I got through the year and played, considering how things had been, I did extremely well.
When you're talking about how things have been, you're talking about
performance,
but also what was going on outside of football.
Yeah, I was handling everything really well, and I think even like kind of just speaking to people and stuff, I've always, even from kind of a young age, I've always been a speaker. I don't shy away from speaking to people. So like even at that point, that was probably a time where I was kind of getting older, but could still have been childish enough to just kind of shut the world away. But yeah, I think I handled everything quite well at that time. I was still open to trying to just do my best in the situation that I was in. So whether I was at home and just getting on with things, or kind of getting used to kind of how things were, just kind of, tackled it head on. Same in football. If I was in training or a game, there was never anything else in my mind. It was just enjoy what I was doing, think about what I was going to do next, how I was going to do it. But I think, my fondest memories would definitely be, that the way I was treated throughout my under 16 year.
Right.
And then my performances that really shouldn't have kind of, come together, that did come together in that year.
Right. I like that, because somebody would have had to look after Ryan White, not just the performance side, and somebody had to consider that. So if we take those early memories of academy, and you'd have gone on to be released by Liverpool, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So how did that early part of your ascension influence what you do now?
It's absolutely about having an empathy for what the system can be, and everybody's journey is so unique. And I think it's just understanding that is the case, and understanding that there's so many different factors and variables that contribute to where you end up at any point in time. So I think being able to look back at that and understand that anyone who enters the apprenticeship system, so post 16 leaves school, they've all got such a different routine, and everybody receives largely the same programme. So
I'm laughing because that is a line that I use often, as that same information, same coach, same lecturers, same training facilities. One does this, one does this.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what fuels me is being able to help to individualise those 2 years as a trainee professional footballer, knowing that the programme is essentially lifted across everybody, club by club, but generally the same, to be able to help people reach their full potential. And I think that's really what I look back at, thinking nobody could possibly ever have had my routine. And obviously I've known and seen many apprentices come through and know that their backstories and support systems are totally different to one another. So what can we do to bridge, plug the gap, elevate everybody as an individual? And I think that's really what's underneath my pursuit of and passion for the job that I'm in.
Right. And what about you, Ryan? How's it shaped who you are today and what you contribute through your role and just then you as a person?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I totally agree with the sense of every person's journey is different. And I think some journeys can seem easier than others, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have been. But I think what drives me really to kind of want to make a change, make things better, and I guess is the fact that I think going back to my playing days, I came out of Bolton after my release meeting. Obviously, no contracts on the table, nothing going ahead. And I'll be honest, I kind of thought that I didn't know where I was going to end up. I think it was more.
Were you prepared for that? With the.
I think
What's the emotion that you describe it as?
I was shocked.
Okay.
But it was for I guess a multitude of reasons. Like my last year at Bolton, I'd been close to the first team. I trained quite a lot with them. Travelled to games with them. Been on the bench in the Carabao Cup. And then this was more the first half of the season. Then went out on loan at Christmas. Did well on my loan, but it was more just because we didn't have games over Christmas. I wanted to go and get games, so I went out on loan, came back, and there'd just been something different. They just felt something different around my playing, my time that I was getting.
What do you mean different?
I just felt like I'd done something wrong, or there was a reason why I wasn't being picked. And I think that if I look back, I should have kind of expected the release meeting or the contract meeting to go how it did. But I also think that there was, at that time, I don't think there was enough communication from myself to my coach, but also vice versa. So I was kind of just in a bit of a middle ground where I wasn't too sure what had gone on to kind of, I guess, come to that conclusion. It's a good point you make, and I'm interested when you say there wasn't a lot of communication. Very often, if I'm sat down with a young player, a young person, it doesn't matter whether they're playing sport or not, I often say that they're defaulting to their authority, so they can choose to communicate or not with you. That's their choice because of the position that they're in. Whether that's right or wrong is very, that's up for debate. Yeah.
However, from your perspective, you said there wasn't much communication from me to the coach. What would have been good communication from you to the coach?
Well, I did at one point I did go in and kind of just ask the question, what do I need to do to kind of get back playing? And I mean, the communication back was I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just that the team were doing well, which we did that final season as well. We won the league, we won the playoffs. So we kind of did everything that we could. So I couldn't argue with the fact the team were doing well. So I kind of just agreed to it, went back out and just assumed that I was going to get time at some point. I just needed to be patient. And that did happen towards the very end. I played probably the last 5-6 games, including the 2 finals, and everything seemed quite good. But I feel like in that time, there was still a few months where I was kind of still like, I'm biding my time, I'm being patient, but nothing's kind of happening.
How are you feeling at this point in this period? What are the emotions that you're going through? And
I think it's a bit of confusion, but also a bit of, I guess, frustration, because I'm still doing everything that I can, but sometimes I feel like actions do speak louder than words, but sometimes words are very useful. So I feel like there could have been definitely more conversation, even if it's just on a personal level, to air how I was feeling. I think at that time as well, and especially I guess since kind of like lockdown, COVID, mental health's become more of a thing and bits like that. But I think that there was more of a negative look it felt like there was more of a negative look if you went in and just kind of said, I'm really lost at the moment. I don't get what's going on, what my situation is, why this is happening, why X, Y, and Z. Whereas I look back on that now and I think even at that time that should have been a silly thing that I thought that I shouldn't be able to do that. But yeah, I feel like I say, with the communication, I should have probably had a few more conversations, whether it's with my actual manager, whether it was with people around the club. They could have definitely been explored more.
Do you see that a lot in your role now? Or
I think there's a lot more communication going on. I think there's tons more going on. I think we've got people in player care posts now at clubs, which people should see as a massive plus, especially to the players. They should be able to kind of see that as somebody that they should be able to trust with things like this as well. If they don't necessarily want to go straight to a coach or a teammate, they should have somebody now in post that should be a great person to go in and at least have conversations with. I guess even if it's just starting a conversation, you don't necessarily need to finish it there and then. But you start the ball rolling at some point. So I think it's definitely improved. And I'm not saying that it was bad back then. I can think of a few people I could have spoke to in a sense, but maybe as a younger person didn't feel that we had that connection that I could have gone in, but I definitely could have looking back. But no, it's definitely improved, and I feel like it's only going to get better. It's just trying to find, I guess, that balance as well of, I feel like there's a slight part that it builds a bit of character in some moments when your back feels against the wall and you're pushing through. But then there can be too much of that, which can lead to the opposite. So I feel like it's definitely getting better. It's just finding a good middle ground as well, where people know there's people there, but then you also have the thought of, I do need to also face a few things and go through a few things to kind of really assert myself and hone in on certain bits.
What are you seeing today? I know you two work together, but I guess that's the role that you're both in right now, is influencing what happens. What are you doing now and in the future that changes that?
Across the academy system in this country, we know it's world class in terms of the support available to players, parents, host families. Because we've looked overseas, we've looked in other sports. There's great practice in the first team professional space, but from an academy perspective, it's as good as it's ever been. It should be, because of the resources. It's developing. I think we've always had safeguarding and welfare and education as kind of their own disciplines within the sport. Out of that has been born player care, which isn't a traditional sort of route of training for anybody really. So we've got a real mixed network of player care managers across the game, which is a strength, especially when we can bring them together, which we do. But it's evolving, and it's understanding what role player care plays within the development programme. We've got to a point now where we're writing a new set of standards for player care. It's a great opportunity to reflect, to understand the insight of players, of parents, of people who are performing the role, and understanding what the priorities are for player care as well, because it's so vast, from inducting new players, transitioning players through the age groups and out of the academy, through to mental health and emotional well-being, inclusion, understanding the voice of the parents and players is a pillar in itself, life skills and personal development, as a stick of rock running through the whole programme. So there's all these different facets of player care, and it's pinning down really what football expects of clubs to deliver across each of those pillars, knowing what's possible, but also being able to prioritise really. So we're not lost in sort of everything that could be done, when we're doing, sort of the priority areas really well. I think transition is one of the critical areas.
Yeah.
I think just listening.
Why?
Well, listening to our conversation, Ryan mentioned the word shock. I sort of throw in anticipation of transition. I think we've got to a point now where we're trying to avoid as many surprises on the day of that retain release meeting, so people can be better prepared, more equipped, and maybe not a case of that being instead of being a professional footballer, but adding to your prospects of being a professional footballer in light of being prepared for football and beyond. I think that's where we've got to. So it has definitely changed. I'm excited to see what comes next. I think we look back and go, if we asked everybody, would you do it again? We know they'd say yes.
What, the players?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of the experience
They'd go through the experience again. That's an interesting one, because I always ask them, especially the second years, if you had your time over, what would you do differently?
Yeah. I think release is potentially always going to be painful, but shouldn't be damaging. And I think as a game, that's what we've got to focus on.
What does you're saying as a game, and it can be done. I was at a business event beginning of the year, and a woman came to me, young woman, in her maybe late 20s, 30s, late 20s. She said, my boyfriend could have done with listening to this. Now I'm talking about applying it to, my normal business stuff. They know who I've worked with. She said he was in an academy. She said he's just had the worst year of his life. I don't think he's got over what happened when he was younger. So, and then she followed up with that by saying they don't support them. And then she followed up with that and said, but judging what you've just said today, now remember, I'm talking to a business group. She said, judging what you've just said today, he needed to have supported himself.
Yeah, it's fair. I think any experience is valid. At any given time, things change, things evolve, things improve, and that's what's happened with the system. I view it as a counsellor, outside of what I do with LFE, as a case of processing your experiences, good, bad, indifferent. And I think the opportunity to do that is key to avoid decades later being faced with a barrier, obstacle of something that happened earlier in life. And I think the opportunities we have now with player care being I say at the forefront, but almost underpinning the development programme, loads of opportunities for young players to process their experiences and the learning. That's part of the programme, football and beyond. So ideally, they understand more about themselves, who they are beyond football, understand the values, the characteristics, the skills, their worth beyond scoring a goal or saving a penalty. So that self-esteem can be nurtured, throughout the experience of the academy system, and you take that with you, I guess. I think it's when somebody has to live without the game, the phrase is, a footballer dies twice. Again, if we can help people to understand that football is what you do, it's not who you are.
It's not who you are. Mm-hmm.
Then I think even myself, I view it as just one chapter of my life that has actually led to so many amazing opportunities, and in some ways it could have been a head start for life beyond football.
But that's difficult when you're 15, 16 and you're in an academy and you're looking at the first team and everybody's telling you you've got potential, and your parents are, and your uncles saying and your aunties saying how well you're doing.
Yeah.
That's difficult at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's your identity, isn't it? As a young person, your school friends know you as the footballer. I still bump into people now and will be introduced as the footballer. They obviously didn't see me play six-a-side last week, but it stays with you. And I think that's not something you should necessarily be ashamed of. But when you are geared around becoming a footballer, and in some ways you almost might have less of a chance of making it if you aren't perpetuating that identity of a footballer.
Yeah.
I think there's a fine balance, isn't there? And that's why there's people like us sat on one side saying, let's look after the person. And then there's other people on the other side saying, this is a profession, you've got to live, eat, sleep football, which I would argue against. But that's because I'm in the world that I'm in.
Yeah.
And it's helping that young person understand how to manage and balance all aspects of what's asked of them. I always think now, looking at the programme, to become a professional footballer, the vision of being perfect is almost placed upon you. You're on a hamster wheel, you haven't got time kicking around the changing room, you're put through a robust, world-class elite programme. So it can be difficult to step away and come away from that at times.
Well, there's lots of examples of that in other areas of life. The armed forces is a classic example. You go into the armed forces, you're trained to be elite, and then the minute you become a civilian, or even when you come out, even if you're on leave, the standards then drop to where you are. And so if you're in one environment where you're saying, there are world-class programs, like you said, there's internationally, there's not many, if you looked across the board, football here, in terms of development, is supposedly, resource-wise, is one of the best in the world. But then how do you prepare that young person for, it's not even life after football, it's life outside of football. And you're looking at it from one angle because you're like, I'm looking at the person. My first conversation with anyone is, I'm more interested in you applying this to your personal life than your professional life. No, I'm here for the football or sport. I'm like, no, if you can't apply it to this, you're not going to be able to apply it to your football.
Yeah. Well, you're one person, aren't you? So as a constant, you are in whichever environment you're in, and what you bring into the table. Who are you? Who, as you would say, it's not about what you do, it's
who you're going to be. At the same time, we are, like, I'm dealing with somebody's dreams. So when somebody comes to me, whether it's a parent who says, I want you to work with my son or daughter, I'm dealing with the kid's dream. Now, I've got lots of people flashing in my head right now. Even just yesterday, exchanged voice notes with a young woman. She'll be here 30 now, at least. She's now in finance. But I remember as a 12-year-old, she was an elite golfer. And, Dad was, you're going to be a tour player, you're going to be a tour player. And a lot of parental pressure. And we dealt with a lot of that, dealing with Dad. I remember having to have a conversation with Dad and saying, and it was like this, you're going to lose your daughter. She's going to go to other men for her advice and not come to you if you do not address how you are dealing with her right now. Now, she's in finance now, and she full circle come back to me because she now wants to go again and apply this to career, personal life. So at the time, I'm dealing with her dreams of being an elite sports person. That's my focus, but also knowing that I'm thinking, when people say I'm showing my age now, but I'm thinking, like, she's 12, 13, 14 years old. I can see the 30-year-old woman.
Yeah. We have to dial into what's relevant to a young person in the now. So when you ask about a 15, 16-year-old, how do we support them to open their minds up to it? We have to make it relevant to them. Talk with Ryan regularly about the fact that if we open up a conversation around, well, you might get injured, you might get released, a new manager might come in. It's hypothetical. So we bring it back to what's going to affect them here and now, and that has to be plan A, which is you, your characteristics, your skills, your values, who you are as a person. And we know that by osmosis that will support football and personal, and we don't have to separate the two. I think that's really where we go after. We use performance as a hook, but we know that there's added benefits. So we will always talk about football performance being supported by developing as an individual and as a person. But we know it will support well-being, transition.
Do they I know you see it, but I'm asking, do they buy into that? Let's go to my work with you guys. I'm in a couple of hours, supposed to be 90 minutes. Always say, don't.
You've missed plenty of trains, haven't you?
I've missed plenty of trains. Always happen. There was one train last week I couldn't miss, though. That's the only one. Like, I had to be on that train. Nearly did, but they don't all get it, though, do they?
No. Again, everybody's an individual. We lift it over everybody, and I think we could take everybody to a certain place with understanding it and buying into it. But that's where the work is, because I don't think it's specific to any particular activity. It's about their application to everything that will happen. Yeah. So you haven't got long here. And again, that's something that's hypothetical. So that's not easy to say it goes fast, which is why you use the second years to impress that onto the first years.
Yeah.
But they have to squeeze everything they can for everything they get. And that isn't only because they might get injured or they might not have a career. It's because it's going to help you on and off the grass. And that's where we try to get to with what we're doing.
Yeah. And it's that awareness of time that I think, and this is, the context because of the work that we do. We're dealing with young people. But that's something that adults forget, is that there's an awareness of time that there's no grasp of, that the clock is ticking and you're not here forever. And I hear what you're saying. You're saying we can't lead with that because that is a shock to the system, but that's what I call the honest conversation. That's reality. And sometimes in my supporting the work that you do, I have to come in and have a conversation that is saying the same thing that you're saying, but I'm saying it a little different, a bit more. I'm saying it as it is. Which gets me onto the point of the work that I do. How's that intertwined with what you've been doing?
Yeah,
Tell me about what you see in my work.
So they're supported from a football point of view. They're supported from an education angle, academically. The missing piece there is personal development, life skills, the added extras that will support who they become in football and outside of football. We've got a network of external providers who are experts, individuals, organisations who can impart that expertise onto apprentice footballers. It's the spaces which football clubs don't have much to offer, and I think it's where, as an organisation, we can provide a unique experience for whatever length of time, really, for them to have awareness raised on certain topics, develop new tools, skills, understand the pitfalls of being a young person and one in football, understand the opportunities and the aspirations that can be fulfilled by thinking outside of the white lines. And that's where people like yourself come in. And as you say, not everybody grasps it straight away. I think that's something we have to accept, and we do have ways of tracking and researching the impact we've had. But we value latent learning, where there will be things that make sense to people beyond the 90-minute session, whether that's a day, week, year, 10 years later. We know it'll happen, we trust, we believe in it. Ryan, what can you remember from when you were an apprentice footballer that was provided to you as a life skills?
Did we miss each other?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't ever remember having a session regarding well, to be fair, I had a driving one that I remember because that was just one of those things. At that time, we were in and around driving, some of us. So there was like half of us that managed to go out and do like a driving kind of session where somebody followed you and you just never knew. So it was like being aware of obviously things that were going on around. We had one where actors came in, and we actually did it with another club as well. We had Wigan in with us at the time. And yeah, I mean, that one definitely sticks in my brain. It's for a multitude of reasons. Obviously, we had people come in and they provided, I guess, a bit of expert acting that went down really well, with like obviously some different activities throughout that kind of afternoon as well, which it got you talking to other clubs, which normally if you saw two teams in a room together, I can tell you what had happened right now. That team would sit there, that team would sit there. There wouldn't be much mingling, whereas you weren't made to, but you kind of did have to have other people's opinions. So you kind of went through bits like that. And then also had a social media one as well, which obviously social media, as you're I guess, especially in today's day and age, if you're a 14 to 19-year-old, social media is probably quite a big part of what people do. So I mean, the safeties around being online and things. And I mean, I probably didn't take much from a lot of stuff right at that moment. I could probably be somebody who absorbed things unconsciously, and then when I needed to, it came back out, or it came to the forefront of my mind. So I think it's definitely something where you can get in the room with people, and you might not necessarily, or they might not necessarily look like everything's going to affect them in the immediate kind of presence or whatever.
But down the road, it's going to
something
come. It's going to come back to them.
They've took stuff in, and they will. Yeah.
Down the road, everything happens for a reason. Who did you meet at the My Future Today workshop?
At the My Future Today workshop.
With the actors. Back.
Oh well. Yeah, I met. To be fair, I mean, I'd had you in the room a couple of times, but I'm trying to think back now.
Myself.
Well,
that was the first time I remember Ryan.
Because I'd met him. Yeah, because you came in after there for like 2 times because of being regional at the time. But that was the first. Yeah, the very first time.
And you know that's it. You know that's music to my ears because.
And then I'd see him around where we live because we live local as well. So we'd.
But that's the context of things happen for a reason, and you two have developed a working relationship. You live down the road from each other. That's not by accident that you played. You've been through the program, and now you end up working together.
Short story. So I remember meeting Ryan at the My Future Today workshop. I was a facilitator. Mm-hmm. Small group activity, sort of small chat. Where are you from? Lytham St Anne's.
Yep.
Ping. That's where I'm from.
Yep.
So I remembered that. Years down the line, I was in my local gym, saw Ryan, and I thought, I'm going to speak to him because I recognise that's Ryan from years ago. Mm-hmm. Just stuck in my memory that he lives where I live and he was at Bolton. Mm-hmm. So I started speaking to him in the gym. At the same time, I'd just signed for AFC Blackpool, making a resurgence back into the non-league, and Ryan had gone on loan at AFC Blackpool. So we were in the same changing room together. I remember speaking to Ryan in the changing room. We were playing against Bamber Bridge, and I said, "What are you up to?" And you mentioned you were in telesales at the time.
Yeah.
I just sort of said, if you were interested in doing anything else, like, let me know, we can sort of explore it. At the same time as using the same gym as us, we put a job advert out. I said, Ryan, something you need to look at. Here we are. He takes a job, speaks about him where he actually lives within Lytham St Anne's. He says, the address. Say, I'm 4 doors down from you. He's now moved out.
It's 4 doors down.
I was about to say I'm now about 2 roads away.
And you're across the road from my favourite links course. Anyway, St Anne's Old Links.
One of the best.
You talk about memories. That was my first ever links course that I ever played. Wondering what they all thought. What's this links golf? Where's the trees?
It's tough enough about the trees.
Yeah. So that is how, and this is something that I often mention to. Again, I'm wanting to say players, but the context of this is what I say to them. Like, it's not guaranteed that you're going to make it, but what I'm doing, and this is why you're in the program, but what I'm doing is I'm saying to you that your future applying this outside of your sports is much more important because 1, you never know who's watching you. 2, you don't know when that could come back into play again. And 3, that you apply these skills to a job or somewhere else, and not just for your sport, but you apply them somewhere else, things will go to a different level.
Yeah.
I've coached tennis players. One in particular, he's called Ross Connolly. 18 he was, and Ross got an injury. He was never going to be on the pathway to become, Roger Federer. But when he called it a day, he said, I want to be an agent. I want to be, I want to support players, because he was passionate about that, something that he didn't feel that he had. Long story sideways, I said to him, Ross, it's going to take 3 years minimum. Like, he had no access, you know, no academic qualifications. His dad was very successful but didn't have a network in sports. And I said to him, it's going to take you 3 years. So we're talking about dealing with rejection, being persistent, the communication skills that we've put in place to help him with his tennis. And I was laying out, you're going to have lots of knockbacks and you're going to have to start at the bottom. But that's part of the process. And he went to an agency, then moved to another one, then moved to another one. And, you know, I'm very proud of the work that we've done. Even today, he has been David Beckham's global commercial director. He's been Luka Doncic, the NBA superstar. He's currently working with Lewis Hamilton. Like, this guy is, you know, one of the best of the best. But he always says to me, he said, Jamie, people always ask me, and he said, I always say to them, it's like these mental skills that you learn for your game. And then he said that I just applied all of that. And that's what we're given through the work that we do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because it's an area that isn't coached within the club on a day-to-day.
It's not coached in schools. It's not coached in college. It's not coached in university.
Yeah.
There are people who be like, yes, it is. No, it's not.
And I think that's why when you're in the room with the academy players, I've been in that space with you many times.
You could do my session. You've been in that many times.
It becomes a vacuum of time, of thoughts. Like, you know, I can sort of feel the group completely dialed into the conversation. And I think you get them to that
Why
point.
are they dialed in?
I think you know how to develop the chemistry from the outset, which I think helps, and the dynamic. You hold people to account immediately, which then enables them to interact with the session. You're not cold calling people, it's a warm call because of how you set it up. And I think they do go away with tools that they can implement now. And I think, as I say before, like, this isn't stuff that you're going to need only in 6 months' time. It's things that you can adopt, you know, in your daily practices, really, here and now. There's a football lens on it, as well as a personal lens. So you're capturing what's important to them at that moment, and maybe what's one of the biggest sort of facets of their life. You're supporting that in addition to other things. And it's things they've not heard before. It's tools they've not had access to. It's the experiences that you've had with people at the top that you're bringing to them, as you say.
I'm passing it down the lift.
Exactly. And I think when you set the context of, if everybody else is doing exactly what you're doing and you're trying to break into the professional space, what's in your tool bag with you that's going to help you get there, and what have you got that no one else has got? So I think, again, it feeds into everything we're doing in trying to help them understand that broad personal development is helpful to them. So when you do get Train Brain, and you've got the pleasure of having Jamie Edwards and his support, that you sponge it for all it's got.
You're a parent now.
Yes.
How old is?
3.
3.
He's going to be the next David Beckham. I see it already.
How do you think about, 2 questions, how do you think about that now, because you're a parent? Yeah, changes, doesn't it? Yeah, it does change. You know, I've got, you know, my son's 20 next week, right? And it's interesting. I remember doing a parent session at Preston. We invited the parents in as well. And one of them said, God, your kids are going to be dead positive, aren't they, when they get older? And they actually happened to be in the back at the time. And I said, are you kidding? He's going to get to 18 and say, Dad, I've heard that train brain shit all my life, you know. And it's interesting. I've always put people around my kids, so I don't have to be the one who's actually saying, do this, you got to be like this, you got to think like this, yeah. So you're a parent of a 3-year-old, and we're not planning his route, but you had parents. You come across lots of parents. How does that change? What do you need the parents to understand?
I have regular, profound eureka moments where I go, oh wow. One of them is we need to give parents a break, firstly, because it's not easy. And
what, being a parent, or not easy being a sports parent?
Not easy being a parent, and the understanding that they don't necessarily know sport, they don't know football. So again, their routes into the academy system can be very different. Might not even like sport. So, I mean, just for me personally, at this point in time, my commitments to Harvey would be, I will always be emotionally available to him. And I will surround him with people that I feel have got his best interests at heart. What I would suggest for parents who are going to training Tuesday, Thursday, games on a Saturday or a Sunday now, is just help them to understand that it's about the journey and not the destination, and even more so the company along the way. Make some friends that don't go to the same school, and spread your network early and meet people from different parts of the country, from different backgrounds. You can get access to all of these enriching opportunities that an academy can provide. I think just enjoy it and try not to look into the crystal ball. It does get more difficult as you get further through the system, because at 14 you go, right, okay, now it's a 2-year contract. We're not saying you're going to be a professional footballer, but by the way, we're going to keep you on for 2 years. So implicitly there's a chance that you could become a professional footballer. And I think it's that balance, really. So it's just understanding your role. And as I say, not necessarily a sports parent now. He prefers cars to football. I'm working on it. Well, there's something in itself. But I think it's just letting them explore, be who they want to be, encourage them to have other interests, other hobbies, and really just letting them take the cork out of the barrel and sort of express themselves in ways beyond football, really. What is a critical point in any young person's life, really. It's not easy being that age anyway. So again, it's polar opposite. It's like eliteness has got so many opportunities to it, but so many risks as well, and it's trying to make the most of the opportunities and sort of negate the risks as best as possible. So yeah, there's a lot involved, not easy.
What would you want for Ryan as a 16-year-old? Either going back and you'd say, I would have wanted this in this space, or what would you have wanted from, your parents?
I guess, to be fair, I'd definitely say that I had pressure from parents as I was kind of going through the academy system.
In what way?
Well, I mean, an example that might not necessarily seem like a lot of pressure, and I guess to somebody younger, they might just kind of ignore it or whatever. But like my mum, I remember my mum put on a bet for me to make my England debut by 21.
Right.
And I remember her telling me, and me thinking, well, one, I don't know how she's got odds for that. Like, that must have been about 10 million to 1. But also just thinking, wow, like, one, my mum thinks I'm good enough that that's going to happen, but then two, I've got to try and make that happen now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm way past that now. That bet is null and void and never going to happen. But in the same sense, I think I did feel pressures that potentially could have been made to be, I guess, a bit more comfortable in certain spaces, like cars on the way home. Just like, I guess, like a bit of general emotional support, I guess, in terms of just asking how things are or how the game...
Asking different questions.
Yeah, asking my view instead of sometimes I feel like parents can be really good and really involved, and I'd want that myself going back to 16. I want them involved. But yeah, I feel like sometimes especially from my experience, the odd other that I've noticed, but there can be pressures of, I think you should have done this. I seen you do this, and that could have been done like that. Or instead of, how do you think that went?
Yeah.
You know, the old question of asking the self what they could have done better, if there was things to improve on. But I feel like, more pressures and, I guess, the emotional support, I think sometimes from personal experience was missed, that could have been put in there just to make that bit of reflection, I guess, smoother as well. Because and if you're in the car on the way home after a game, being a young player, you are thinking about the game. There's not many, I don't think, that will be travelling home thinking about, I'm going to have tea now, or I'm going to go and play out, whatever it may be. It's more
unfortunately, Ryan, it's, I'm often saying to parents that, I call it, you've got 2 miles in the car. Yeah, hopefully it's a longer journey than 2 miles, but you've got 2 miles in the car to talk about the sport. And then after that, they want to be back being, your 15-year-old or your 16-year-old. And you've got to have ways of doing that. So what we're talking about here is, does the parent have tools? So and I often get asked, well, Jamie, nobody's given me the tools to be able to pass down to my son or daughter. And we'll take this beyond the sport. That's the key here.
And I think even that, though, I mean, we go back to the forever changing space. We do now tool parents with, or give them a session where it does kind of give the parents tools and ways to kind of think of what their child's going through. Like we said, we know it's pressure on the parent as well, the travelling, the obviously the stress of kind of leaving work, getting the kid ready for
absolutely
going. But we have now got tools, I guess things that they can now use to further their thinking of what's going on and their experiences, as well as making sure that their son, daughter, whoever's playing what sport, is now in a bit of a better place as well, kind of, going forward, which that's another, I guess, big positive that we've had kind of going forward, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a narrative that parents put pressure on the child and try and live their dreams through their child. Everyone's different in that, I'm sure that does happen. But I go back to just myself and I think, it was me putting the pressure on my parents.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that as a parent as well?
Yeah.
When the person who has loved football from the age of whatever, it's a national game, there's hundreds of thousands of boys and girls wanting to be a footballer.
And we can put this context in any sport as well, or the major sports.
But when you're getting sniffs of that opportunity, that is going to be all-consuming for that young person. And sometimes it's for the parent to, address that with the child rather than it being them dialing down their expectations.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And it's back to, how do you have that conversation? Is it a chat? Do you, are you saying, well, you're not quite good enough, Johnny? Or are you supporting that? And, again, I've come across and supported lots of parents in that. And you've got 2 different examples there. You're the one putting the pressure on dad, saying, have you got somebody to come and watch me? And you've got the opposite. Somebody's saying, betting that you're going to be this good. And then you've got the other extremes of, I get asked about, well, what about the Williams sisters and their dad and how they were prepared, or Tiger Woods? All individual cases. There are many thousands of cases like that went the opposite way. I remember the young woman I was telling you about in finance. I worked with a friend of hers who, she was a young golfer, and her dad had said to him, I'm pushing her because my parents didn't push me. But what we had was, the flip side to that was, if the young girl made a mistake, then she was always looking around for dad. She was looking around to see, his approval. But I've seen that with young teenagers, and I've seen that with Premiership footballers looking into the box to get approval from dad. So the parents aspect is very important. So it's great to hear that you are doing things like that, and that's an area that I'm always having conversations with them.
Yeah. My best friend, this was Friday, went for a drink with him. Si, been meaning to tell you all week, but I was waiting to see you. This is about Tobias Hill, 4 years old, his son. Went to football with him on Saturday. There was someone stood behind the goal, didn't know who it was, didn't think he was a parent. One of the coaches pulled my friend after the session and said, did you see the person behind the goal? He said, yeah, didn't recognise him. He said, yeah, he's a Liverpool scout. And he said to me, who's that with the blonde hair? And I said, that's Tobias Hill. And he said, I thought so. That's who I'm here for. So he tells my friend after the session. My friend says, he didn't play so well, did he? He said, well, the scout thought so. And he's coming back next week. So the story ends there for now.
4 years old?
4 years old. And I said to my friend, what have you done? Have you told him? And he said, yeah, I've told him. I was like, fair one. He'll love it. I was like, no harm done whatsoever. And I said, you must have had a little buzz off that. He said, yeah, obviously tempered. But this is a living situation, live. And as a parent of a young child myself, I'm thinking, yeah, I probably would get a little bit of a buzz off that. So when you're in it, it can be difficult to manage it, I'm sure.
And that's back to, does the parent or does the individual have the tools to manage their own expectation, manage their own emotions in that situation?
Exactly. And I think, speaking to people, sharing it, that's what you wanted a conversation with me about. I think, that's it's in hand. But I did think to myself, wow, maybe I'm in this as a job, I think I'd love that.
Yeah. Well, I think, is there anything that you want to add? Let me just, if there's a young person or even a family, what are you leaving them with?
I guess if you're looking at the whole sporting career, like you want to take, let's say mine for example, 11 to 19, then I'd just say enjoy the experience, take it all in. There's a lot that you can learn, and I'll be honest, I still value everything that I learn as a footballer so much to this day, and I feel like if I didn't have some of them things, I was never massively academic, I don't know where I would have ended up. So I think all the skills, all the sessions that you have on, whether it's about finance and it doesn't seem too important to you, absorb it all, understand the situation you're in. It's not an easy career, but it's not a long one. So you've got to enjoy it, you've got to work hard. But I think the experience is something that you'll never get to do again. So I think it's all about enjoying it, living in each moment as you can, and enjoy the good and bad times. Enjoy them both, because life's full of them. And if you're doing a sport, it's probably something that you'll love. So enjoy both sides of it.
Good advice. And for you?
Do the work to understand who you are. Find spaces to be that person, wherever those environments are. Be authentically yourself as much as you can be. And surround yourself with people and reach out for support from people like Jamie Edwards, like people who are going to be able to fully invest themselves in you and not necessarily face opposite you, but walk alongside you on that journey with have nothing but your best interests at heart. And I think if you can do all of that and process the experiences that you're having with people like yourself, you'll come out the end of it feeling more fulfilled and happier with whatever did happen. That would be probably my message, really.
That's good. Very valid and good advice from two people who have actually walked it in similar but different ways. Really appreciate you coming and share. We could talk for days on this, because I think there's areas that there's areas that we wouldn't have got to. But I salute both of you for actually now passing it back down, but also being involved with an organisation that is just leading. And it's why I still work with you. People say, "What? You're going to Bristol? You're going to Bristol? You're going to Southend? You're going to, Accrington Stanley?" I'm like, yes, I am, because there are people there, young people who down the road, they're going to be able to apply what they're learning now to their own family or to their own life or to another career. And I hope they make it. I want them to be the very best that they can be. But I also want them to be the very best people that they can be, because football finishes at 3:00 in the afternoon. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Well, yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Yeah,
Enjoyed
thank you
that.
very much.
Yeah.
Very good.
Good. Should we go and grab something to eat?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Stefan, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Stefan, so do you work here, or do you work with Jamie, or what's the link?
We've had last month, haven't we?
Yeah.
Done some talking head stuff.
Yeah. So we're just